Hey, what's up everyone? How you doing? It's me, Mr. 4K Upscaler. On this video I want to talk about Dolby Vision. I don't think I really covered Dolby Vision in like in-depth look and review. I spoke about it here and there. I showed you the demos and whatnot, comparisons on both OLED, LED, and other televisions. But I never really spoke about Dolby Vision in depth. Okay, first let's talk about Dolby. Dolby Labs, Dolby Laboratories. Let me first walk you down to what Dolby Laboratories is. Obviously, everyone who is familiar with home cinema, home theater, people who are involved in building a home theater, they're movie buffs and they love home theater. They built the speakers, the whole 9 yards with the amplifiers and everything. Okay, people who are familiar with the home theater, they know exactly what Dolby is. And I'm not making this video for professionals. Professionals, they already know this. They're gonna skip this video, they're gonna go somewhere else because they already know everything there is to know about the Dolby. I'm not making this for professionals. If you're a professional, you can skip this video, you can just leave, because you obviously know everything there is to know about the Dolby, so you don't need to watch this. This is really me cutting it down in basic steps for people who don't know anything about anything, and they're just new. They're like noobs. I'm making this video for noobs. That's what I'm making this video for. If you are a noob and you have no idea what the Dolby is and how Dolby started and how do they transition into this, into visuals, then you should just go ahead and stay here and watch through this video. Alright, so what is Dolby? Dolby Labs. Dolby Labs originally started as a home theater surround sound company. They were involved in audio. Their main thing was creating the audio, the most versatile audio that you can have, which is the surround sound audio. They've been involved into creating a bunch of different high-end theaters throughout the world and throughout the nation here in America, and they were very successful with their Dolby surround sound theaters and systems. They've been around since, oh my God, since 1980s. They've been around, and then into the late 90s they started advancing to Dolby Pro Logic, Dolby Stereo. I'm sorry, Dolby Pro Logic came in like way like mid 90s, late 90s, but they got into Dolby. Actually, I'm sorry, Dolby Pro Logic and Dolby Digital came in mid-90s. It was like 96, 97, 98. I think 96, 95. It might have been way before that. It might have been 93. Okay, I could be off on the years, but it was in the early 90s when Dolby Digital surround sound kind of enhanced, where the Dolby Digital Surround Sound 5.1 started like kicking in. You had DTS, I think it was in 1993. You had Jurassic Park with DTS, which is Digital Theater Surround, totally different company. And then you had Dolby Digital that was going head to head with DTS. DTS was encoded to a higher decibels, so therefore it was much clearer, much louder sound and more higher bass. But in terms of like the frequencies, and I think they were pretty much similar in that, like in a crossover. It's just that the DTS had much lower hertz when it comes to the bass, and much higher decibels when it comes to the highs on a crossover frequency. So that way it was much louder, and you can hear things. The speakers were more active. But Dolby Digital started advancing their systems to kind of be in par with DTS. Okay, these two have been rivals as far as I can remember, but I think Dolby was always a preferred choice for a lot of people. A lot of people always prefer the Dolby Digital. Okay, so Dolby's been involved in making audio, making home theater systems since 1980s, 1990s, and of course today. They have advanced, and throughout the history, you know, they supplied all of these movie theaters. They even have their own movie theaters, obviously, Dolby theaters out there. They have supplied so many equipments and technologies to have the best possible surround sound in the movie theaters. So basically, when it comes to movie theaters, Dolby, it's the one company that Hollywood looks for. Okay, when the Hollywood goes out there to distribute the movie into movie theaters, they look for Dolby. All of these Hollywood studios are partnered with Dolby, and of course DTS, but mainly with Dolby. The reason they're a partnership with Dolby because Dolby's been the leader when it comes to the surround sound. You know, nobody does it better when it comes to surround sound than Dolby. They've done so many movies. They also have done video games. There's certain video games they have Dolby Digital. They've done that in the late 90s, and then they advanced to PlayStation 2 in 2000s. So Dolby's been around, has been involved in a lot of products, even in the Sound Blaster. You know, in the Sound Blaster, creative with the Sound Blaster, they were partnership with Dolby. Dolby's been Dolby is like a worldwide icon. Everybody knows that Dolby, when it comes to the surround sound, you look for one company, and that's Dolby. All right, the reason I'm telling you this, because I want to get this out of the way. Even though you can Wikipedia this, you can learn this yourself, but the reason I'm telling you this, it's because I want you to understand where Dolby's coming from. Dolby's been involved in cinema for a long, long time. Okay, yes, they are mainly focused. They were mainly focused on the audio department, but they've been involved in movies for very, 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 very long time. Now, let's move on to the part that everybody wants to know. Dolby Vision. How did Dolby Vision start? Well, first, it started with the patent that Dolby Labs created. Okay, this patent was something that they wanted to utilize from standard dynamic range called the SDR. I'm sure you guys have seen this, like on the PlayStation 2 and some other devices where they have the SDR, standard dynamic range, okay, where they try to enhance the contrast levels or the white bright levels and deep dark levels, so that way the picture can look a bit more vivid. They, you know, so they looked at that and they tried to create their own patent, basically, their own, like, if you will, experiment called high dynamic range. But this high dynamic range was something that needed to utilize a higher bits of color. So basically they needed a 10-bit television to utilize this higher bits of color. And of course, you know, a 10-bit television is that source. So they started experimenting with this. So they created this thing called high dynamic range, and they implemented it with 10-bit televisions, that have much higher, wider spectrum of colors, with the color gamut and the peak brightness. And here's what happened. This is to what I know. I don't know if this is true or not. Sorry about that. I think I'm getting sick, dude. Something's going on. Anyway, what happened is they created this high dynamic range and they sold it because they were too afraid to. They felt it was too risky for them to kind of like do it on their own, because they were mainly focused on the Dolby audio department. They were kind of too afraid to jump into the visuals by themselves. So what they basically did when they created this patent called high dynamic range in Dolby Labs, they sold it to third parties, you know, different companies like Samsung, Sony, LG. They sold it. They sold it to a third party, and they didn't have any rights to it anymore. Means it was on a third party market, meaning everyone can claim high dynamic range, meaning that no one is ownership of the high dynamic range. Means no one controls the high dynamic range. It's an open source. Everybody can use it. They sold it. They sold the patent. Okay. But what's important for you guys to understand is that Dolby Laboratories created high dynamic range. You know, how do I know this? Well, if you don't believe me, do your research, do a steady research, do a in-depth research, go to the correct sources. Don't just type it on the Google, but go to the correct sources, and you will find that high dynamic range was created in Dolby Laboratories. Dolby created high dynamic range. And then from there, once they saw the success of high dynamic range and how popular it was, what happens after that, they felt, okay, now that this experiment was very successful, now we can go ahead and we can create our own format that's different from high dynamic range, from our pioneer that we created called high. Think of high dynamic range as a pioneer that Dolby gave birth to. Okay, so after that, the Dolby Laboratories decided, hey, you know what? Since the 4K televisions and since the high dynamic range has now evolved, why don't we create something more superior to that? And then we can claim it our own. We can call it our own. So what they created Dolby. Dolby Vision with their icon name, so they know, so everybody knows that belongs to Dolby. No one can claim that unless they partner up with them personally. So they created a Dolby Vision. They created a more sophisticated Dolby Vision. Now, you're going to ask, well, what is the key difference between Dolby Vision and HDR10? HDR10, it's limited to as how much of nits of peak brightness it can use. It can only go to a certain limit of peak brightness. You can go up to maybe over maybe 1100, 1200, maximum 1200 nits. I think the HDR10 can go. I don't think you can go above 1400. I think 1400 is like limit. I don't think you can even get that far, but I think 1200 nits, it's like a limit for the HDR10. It doesn't go above that. Okay. Some people say you can go up to 1400. Maybe that's true to a certain scenes for a few seconds, but it doesn't stay that long throughout the whole movie. You know, it's maximum 1200 nits, man. That's like from what I understand. So, bottom line is HDR10, high dynamic range 10. They call it 10 because of 10-bit. High dynamic range 10-bit is limited to how many nits of peak brightness it can reach. It has limitation. There's a reason they put the 10 there, because it's a 10-bit color. Dolby Vision, it's encoded not just for 10-bit, it's encoded for 12-bit. It's encoded for unlimited open source peak brightness and bitrate of color, meaning that it's an open source for the future content, for the future televisions, for future projectors, meaning you're not limited. When you have a new TV that, let's say, goes up to 4,000 nits, let's say the new Sony TV that's going to be 4,000 nits or even 10,000 nits, Dolby Vision will work perfectly on that television, because Dolby Vision, has no limitation. It has no limitation as to how many nits of peak brightness it can take. So Dolby Vision, it's created for the televisions in the future. They created the Dolby Vision in mind to be future-proof. What they created, basically, it's future-proof. All right. And by doing so, they also created other rivalries out there. You know, like Technicolor has their own. Hyperlog Gamma has their own. Of course, now the HDR10, it's moving into HDR10 Plus. Samsung's working on that, okay? And they're all trying to compete with Dolby Vision. But here's the problem. Dolby Vision has no limitations. Dolby Vision will always look the best because you can put as many nits as you want. You can put as much peak brightness as you want. Dolby Vision will encode that. You can put as many bits of color as you want. Dolby Vision will encode that. Will encode that. Okay, Dolby Vision, think of it like an open source. It has no limitations. Okay? All right? And there's a couple of things you guys need to understand. There is this term called static metadata and dynamic metadata. All right. Now, static metadata, it's measured by HDR10 because HDR10 only has a static metadata. Static means it just stays at that limitation of what it can actually process. Dynamic metadata, think of it like an open source. It can fluctuate. It can go to as many nits as you want. The bits of color can go as high as you want because it has no limitations put to it. It has no shades to it. Okay, it's not limited. So I'm staying away from using technical terms like static metadata, dynamic metadata, because if I use these terms, you guys will go to sleep. Okay, you guys will get confused. And the reason I started this channel was to cut down all of these things into baby steps, basic terms. So that way a regular Mary and regular Joe have some basic understanding of the difference. Okay, and that's why I do this video. I could easily talk in a technical jogger and say chroma upsampling, YCBCR, and then metadata this, metadata that. And put all these different technical quotas for you, and then you guys will get confused. That's for professionals. What HDTV Test does, he makes videos for professionals. Vincent Theo does videos for professionals. For professional calibrators, for people who have the knowledge. Okay, he's not doing it for regular Joes and regular Marys. I'm just going to let you know that right now. Okay. I understand his language. I know exactly what he's talking about. But me, I'm trying to give you guys a basic terms. I like to use basic terms. I think the best way for people to learn about something they don't understand is if you cut it down into a basic levels, in a basic terms. I think brain will understand it better if you dissect it into a basic terms. Okay? That'll be like a doctor using a technical jogger to you, and you'll never understand what it basically means. Doctor sometimes has to talk to you in a basic terms so that you understand. All right, so now that you know that Dolby Vision, it's better. Now that you understand that Dolby Vision can go with a higher nits of peak brightness, it can go with a higher bits of color. Therefore, it makes it a more superior high dynamic range. It's still a HDR format. It's still high dynamic range. It just has a different patent name to it. Hybrid Gamma is still high dynamic range. All of these names you see, Hybrid Gamma, Technicolor, HDR10 Plus, Dolby Vision, they are all from the same source. They're all HDR. It's just that they're different. They're encoded differently, okay? They're dynamic metadata instead of static metadata, and they work differently. But they're all from the same cloth. They're all pretty much birthed from the same cloth, from the same company, Dolby Laboratories. So Dolby Vision, to me personally, it's the best format for the movies. Like the other day, I was watching the Infinity War. I mean, it's just like night and day. You see scenes, you see stuff that you actually didn't see. Maybe on the HDR10 that you didn't notice it, you will see that on Dolby Vision. And Dolby Vision really creates that excellent vividness and brightness of color, because Dolby Vision can go with a higher brightness of peak nits. That means that your color will be much brighter. That means that in the distance you will see more. You will see more detail on the ground. You will see a lot of detail on someone's costumes and whatnot. It will do that. And they do have some some demos here that you can look into if you want to, like this one right here, where you can pretty much like they show you like how much you're missing when you don't have Dolby Vision, how much you're getting when you get Dolby Vision. Like what this basically does, this is what happens when you don't have Dolby Vision, when you don't have HDR format. What basically happens is your colors become more dimmed because you don't have that color gamut implemented. Your contrast levels are out of balance because they're not implemented properly through this format. Once you implement a high dynamic range format, or in this case Dolby Vision, this is what happens. Everything enhances, everything becomes more vibrant, but this vibrancy will depend on your television. Okay, a lot of people buy Dolby Vision televisions and they say, well, I don't see any difference. Well, that depends on your Dolby Vision television. What type of Dolby Vision television did you buy? If you bought a Dolby Vision television that only has like 700 nits or 750 nits, it has a decent color gamut, nowhere near where it needs to be, contrast levels are not that great, well, guess what? That Dolby Vision will not look that great. Dolby Vision only works the best if you have a really great TV to utilize that format. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to have a television that utilizes that format. You can't buy a cheap television and then expect Dolby Vision to do the magic. The only way you're going to get that magic is if your television can utilize it. Your television has to have 3 necessary ingredients, and I think I already said this on my previous videos. Number 1, you're going to need a television that has a full spectrum of colors, meaning it has to be a full wide color gamut television. And if you're not sure how to look for it, look for the UHD premium sticker on there. If it has a UHD premium sticker, it means that it is a full wide color gamut television. Do your research. Go to the website, find out what technology that television has. What type of technology are they using? Are they using a quantum dot to enhance that spectrum of colors? Are they using photon technology to enhance the color? You need to go in there. You need to find out if it has in fact that technology. So first, look for a full wide color gamut. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to look for the contrast levels. Okay, does it have a full array local dimming? If it's a LED television, you have to make sure that it has a full array local dimming. Make sure that it has as many local dimming zones as possible. If that TV has 96 plus or maybe more local dimming zones, then you know your contrast ratio, your contrast levels will be excellent. There won't be any bending light or anything like that. You can have a really nice deep dark levels. Okay, so that's number 2, full array local dimming. And number 3, it's the peak brightness. You gotta have that higher peak brightness to achieve that level of detail that you just see right here that's being pointed out. So you have to look for those 3 ingredients. It has to have those 3 ingredients. So you got to look for those 3 ingredients on your TV. Full white color gamut, contrast ratio, contrast level zones, meaning full array local dimming, and the peak brightness. So you got to have those 3. Look for a peak brightness that's at least 900. If you get a TV that's at least 900 nits, that's just on the ballpark where HDR needs to be. Okay? So, and that's what they're basically showing you here, you know, like you see this photo. I know this kind of, it doesn't do it justice, but this is what they're trying to, for the dummies. They're trying to explain this for the dummies, for the regular Joe, regular Mary. Hey, this is like what you're missing. And it's true. This is exactly what you're missing when you don't have, like, see, like right here, The black levels are out of whack. They're kind of washed out. And here, not only do you get the contrast levels, but you get the peak brightness. You see, this is what happens when you have all those three ingredients. The ones that I just mentioned. Peak brightness, full array local dimming, and full white color gamut. This is what you get. The difference is between HDR and all these other HDR formats and the Dolby Vision. The Dolby Vision has no limitations. It's dynamic metadata. It fluctuates. It can go. You can put a 12-bit color with meaning even more colors. That's gonna look even more popping on this picture with 8K and then 4,000, 10,000. Hell, you can put 24,000 nits if you want on the Dolby Vision, and Dolby Vision will still utilize that. Dolby Vision, it's the most superior format. Okay, it's not just me saying. You can talk to professionals. You can talk to anybody out there in the market who's involved into a cinema or filmmaking, and they will tell you Dolby Vision is the most superior. Just like Dolby Atmos is the most superior surround sound. When you implement Dolby Vision with Dolby Atmos, you're going to be truly immersed in that movie experience. Not only visually are you going to be immersed, especially if it's a Dolby Vision IMAX with 70 millimeter that goes up to 12K resolution, and then you add Dolby Vision on top of that IMAX, and on top of that Dolby Vision IMAX 70 millimeter 12K, you add Dolby Atmos, a very sophisticated Dolby Atmos full experience, Dolby Atmos surround sound. Then you're gonna truly be immersed in that movie experience. So if you guys went to Dolby Vision theaters and you watched the Infinity War, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You'll understand what type of experience that was. That's what Dolby does. So hopefully this video, and then here, see, they'll let you know, they'll let you know what apps support Dolby Vision. You got Voodoo. Voodoo is actually, it's pretty good when it comes to Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. I think they're probably one of their best partners because they utilize Dolby Atmos and Dolby Visions on a bunch of movies. You got Netflix. It's kind of limited, but it's there. You got iTunes, obviously Apple TV. Apple TV has a bunch of Dolby Vision, but right now they're lacking on Dolby Atmos. They will be releasing Dolby Atmos support later on this fall. Not sure when, probably October. Then you got Amazon Prime. It has a limited Dolby Vision. It's only on the TV shows, their own TV shows. They have it. They don't have the Atmos. They only have Dolby Vision on some TV shows, I think. Not on the movies. But your Voodoo is your best bet right now when it comes to Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, the full Dolby experience. Voodoo's been doing this for a long time now, way before the Apple TV. Apple TV has a lot to catch up. Slowly they're catching up to it, but they're also missing some movies. Movies like Disney, they don't have Disney in Dolby and Dolby Vision and Atmos, so they're like lacking on that. But they do have 20th Century Fox, but it only supports HDR. So, I don't know if there's anything else I can say that I haven't already said here. Look, Dolby Vision, it's the most superior format, the most superior HDR format, and in my honest opinion, this is the best format you can get. But the experience of Dolby Vision will depend on your television. You can't have a low-end television and then you expect Dolby Vision to shine. It doesn't work that way. You gotta have a really good Dolby Vision television that's at least, I don't know, let's say you got a Dolby Vision television that's 2,000 nits or 1,400 nits with wide color gamut and contrast ratio that's much higher with full array local dimming. Then yes, you will appreciate that Dolby Vision much, much better. Okay. But is it a drastic difference between HDR and Dolby Vision? Well, like I said, it depends. You guys, you have to remember, it depends on your TV. If your TV is limited, I don't think you're going to see that much of a difference between HDR10 and Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision, it's dynamic data. It's an open source. It can go higher. But Dolby Vision feeds off of your TV. Depends on what your TV can do. If your TV cannot utilize that higher nits of peak brightness, if your TV can utilize that color gamut, then the Dolby Vision, you will not see that much of a drastic difference. But yes, the whole point of this video is Dolby Vision is the most superior HDR format. Okay, and I think in this half an hour, I think I explained everything from where Dolby Vision started, Dolby Laboratories, how they started with their patent, how they sold it, and how they created Dolby Vision. Okay, so yes, Dolby created high dynamic range. They are the godfathers of high dynamic range. Okay, that's a fact. I don't have to wonder about that. That's a fact. And you guys can contact Dolby Laboratories. Please do so. If people think that I'm trying to spread some misinformation here, please do your research, or you can contact Dolby Laboratories, and Dolby Laboratories will acknowledge to you, yes, that they created Dolby, that they created high dynamic range, and then they sold it on the market, in a free market, so that way they can see how it works. And once they saw the success of high dynamic range, then they created their own Dolby Vision, and this is their own, and it's the most superior format. This is the most superior format, just like Dolby Atmos is the most audio superior format. And if you have both of these, and you got a really good home theater surround sound that supports full-blown Dolby Atmos experience, and if you have a television that supports a much higher nits of peak brightness and has Dolby Vision, then you're going to be totally immersed in Dolby experience. Well, there you go. I don't know if there's anything else I can say that I haven't said here in about 33 minutes. I think, sorry guys, I'm just having a running nose, and I don't know what I think I got sick or something, man. Some kind of a flu. Early end of the summer kind of a flu. I don't know. But anyway, there you have it. Hopefully this video was informative. Remember, I do these videos to explain things to you in a basic terms. I'm not doing these videos to use a technical jogger. I'm doing these videos to explain to you, and hopefully you guys will listen to this video and will learn something. You know, I'm not saying HDR is bad. It's not bad. HDR still is good. It's still good, but Dolby Vision, it's better because it's dynamic metadata. It's an open source. It can really, there's no limitations to Dolby. There's no limitations put on Dolby Vision. It can go as high as you want it to go. If you got the most powerful television in the world that can enhance that peak brightness or the color gamut, you're gonna enjoy Dolby Vision. You're gonna be blown away by Dolby Vision. Okay, because there was no bars put on Dolby Vision. That's why they call it dynamic metadata, not static metadata. But they're both from the same cloth. Okay, there you have it. Hopefully you learned something here. I know there's still going to be people out there trying to educate me, you know. But anyway, if you want to educate me, actually educate yourself. Do extensive research. Go to Google. How about you contact Dolby Laboratories? Contact Dolby Laboratories. Send them an email, and they will tell you exactly what I just told you. That they first are the ones who created high dynamic range. There you have it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good one though. Take care.